Iminachante Quatrina Legislature in Guahan is called to order. If we could please stand and for the prayer, will Senator Sir Nicholas please kindly lead us?
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Heavenly Father, we come before you today as your servants to do your work in this house for your people. We ask that you send your Spirit down upon us and inspire us with the divine grace of your wisdom and your temperance, that we may evaluate all of these measures before us through your eyes in the benefit of your people. And we ask this in your name, amen. In the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen.
For the recognition of the recipient of Imiladzinmas, Takilu na Sacrificiu, Senator Lee, you are recognized.
Sidus Masi. On behalf of a grateful island and country, we honor Steward's Mate Second Class Petty Officer Vicente Agulao Cruz, World War II, and the family of Steward's Mate Second Class Petty Officer Vicente Agulao Cruz for making the ultimate sacrifice in service and defense of our island and country.
Sidus Masi. For the Inifresi, Senator Lee.
Inifresi. Gininimastakilu, ginosoku, imastakulum gikurasonhu, zanimasfigu, naninasinyahu, hu ufresin maisadzu, parabai protehi, zanu defendi, ihinengi, ikutura, ilingwahi, airi, hanum, zanitanu tsamoru, niren shakuriretsu gininazu ustata, esti hua fitma, gihilui biblia, zanibenderahu, ibenderan guahan.
Could Senator St. Augustine please lead us in the Guam hymn?
Fanogi tamoru urita nota kantanima anyagi todu ilugar para y honra para y gloria abiba islas en para y honra, para y gloria, aviva islas en para todo y tiempo y paz para hita dan ginin langit na bendición contra peligro navam safuham dus protegis languam contra peligro navam safuham dus protegis languam.
Senator Muña for the national hymn. Thank you very much. Please be seated, and clerk, please take the roll call.
Senator Atta, Senator Uggan, Senator Castro, Senator Espadon, Senator Esteves, Senator Lee, Senator Morrison, Senator Munoz, Senator Nelson, Senator Rodriguez, Senator San Augustine, Senator San Nicolas, Acting Speaker Terlahi, Senator Torres. Madam Speaker, there is a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Good morning, everyone. Majority Leader, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, I move to approve the Legislative Journal.
On the motion to approve the Legislative Journal, dated August 27, 2018, are there any objections? No, hearing no objections, motion carries. Majority Leader, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, there are communications and petitions, and I move that they be appended to today's session journal.
On that motion, are there any objections? No objections, motion carries.
Madam Speaker, there are messages from Imagalahin Guahan, and I move that they be appended to today's session journal.
On the motion that messages from Imagalahin Guahan be appended to today's session journal, are there any objections? Hearing no objections, motion carries.
Madam Speaker, there are reports of standing committees, and I move that they also be appended to today's session journal.
On the motion that reports of standing committees be appended to today's session journal, are there any objections? No objections, motion carries.
Madam Speaker, there are no reports of select committees.
Thank you, Mr. Majority Leader. Please proceed.
Madam Speaker, I move that bills introduce bill numbers 335-34 COR and 336-34 COR, 337-34 LS through 340-34 LS and 341-34 COR through 353-34 COR. Resolutions introduced, resolution numbers 489-34 COR through 509-34 COR, and certificates introduced, certificate numbers 272-34 COR through 275-34 COR be deemed to have been given their first reading.
On the motion that these bills be deemed to have been given their first reading, is there any objection? If there's no objection, motion carries.
Madam Speaker, I move to excuse senators not present for today's legislative session.
On the motion to excuse senators, is there any objection? If no objection, motion carries.
Madam Speaker, I move that all congratulatory, commendatory, and condolence resolutions and legislative certificates introduced today and for the remainder of this legislative session be considered first read and adopted, and to allow Legislative Council to make technical corrections and to add all senators as co-sponsors.
On the motion, is there any objection? No objection, motion carries. We are now on legislative concurrences.
Madam Speaker, I move to place the following from the Committee on Health, Tourism, Military Affairs, and Senior Citizens, the nomination of Melissa C. Chargalov to serve as a member of the Guam Behavioral Health and Wellness Center Advisory Council with a recommendation to do confirm to be placed in the voting file.
On the motion, is there any objection? No objection, motion carries.
Madam Speaker, I move to place the following from the Committee on Health, Tourism, Military Affairs, and Senior Citizens, the nomination of Dr. Ryan M. Claras, DPT, to serve as a physical therapist representative of the Guam Board of Allied Health Examiners with a recommendation to do confirm in the voting file. On
the motion, is there any objection? No objection, motion carries.
Madam Speaker, I move to place the following from the Committee on Health, Tourism, Military Affairs, and Senior Citizens. The nomination of Dr. Vincent S. Duenas to serve as a member of the Guam Board of Medical Examiners with a recommendation to do confirm to be placed in the voting file.
On the motion, is there any objection? Hearing no objection, motion carries.
Madam Speaker, I move to place the following from the Committee on Education, Finance, and Taxation, the nomination of the following individuals: Conrad A. Kerber, Sandra H. McKeever. I take that back, stand corrected. Reports out the nomination of Conrad A. Kerber to serve as a member of the Alcoholic Beverage Control Board with a recommendation to do confirm be placed in the voting file.
On the motion for Conrad Kerber, is there any objection? Hearing no objection, motion carries.
Madam Speaker, I move to place from the Committee on Education, Finance, and Taxation the nomination of Sandra H. McKeever to serve as a member of the University of Guam Board of Regents with a recommendation to do confirm to be placed in the voting file.
On the motion for the nomination of Sandra McKeever, are there any objections? Hearing no objection, motion carries. There's no item on the consent. We're on the second reading. Senator Atta, you are recognized.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, I move to place Bill 28- I move to place Bill number 28-34 COR as amended by the Committee on Environment, Land, Agriculture, and Procurement Reform into the third reading file, and I would like to discuss it.
Please proceed, Senator Atta.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Bill 28-34 deals with making some sweeping amendments to the Guam Procurement Act, in particular with respect to Articles 9 and 12. Articles 9 and 12 pertain to the legal and contractual remedies in Guam's procurement law. I would like to just give a real quick background of where we've come with the genesis of Bill 28-34. First of all, I want to establish that the Guam Procurement Act was enacted in 1982, almost 36 years ago. And since then, much has been learned through experience and from decisions resulting from protests that had been filed. A reform of Guam's procurement code would enable the incorporation of lessons learned from these experiences. Bill 28-34 was introduced in February of 2017, and it was publicly heard in March of 2017, and subsequently a number of roundtable discussions were conducted. The genesis of Bill 28-34 goes back to the 32nd Legislature when a Bill 224-32 was passed unanimously but was vetoed. The 33rd Legislature revisited the issue at the beginning of its term with Bill 20-33 to address the issues raised in the veto message, and again was unanimously passed and again vetoed. Another effort was made at the end of the 33rd Legislature with Bill 162-33 addressing issues raised in the second veto. Again, it was unanimously passed, but pocket vetoed. Along the way through all that, multiple public hearings and roundtables were conducted. Along the way, large and small changes were made to the substance of the bills, informed by objections, comments, and suggestions raised in the various public hearings and roundtables. In the nature of a bill like this, no one got everything they sought. Compromises and policy choices were judiciously considered and made by the committee. So why are we here again? We are here because everyone can agree that the existing framework of the procurement code is defective, but not everyone can agree on the appropriate fixes. This is a stalemate that ensures we will continue to struggle against a process that is easily gamed and gives us results that are not in the best interests of the government or its vendors. Bill 28-34 considers only part of the procurement law. There are many things that could be done to improve the law, but Articles 9 and 12 of the procurement law are deemed to be where the bottleneck is in the procurement process. So it is essential to get this done first and foremost. Articles 9 and 12 deal with the administrative and judicial resolution of controversies in the three areas of procurement that are cognizable under the procurement law. That is, the solicitation and award disputes, controversies about the suspension or debarment of contractors, and procurement contract disputes between the government and a contractor. But the elephant in the room is, of course, controversies involving the solicitation or award of a procurement contract. The approach of Bill 28-34 is predicated on the observation that the government's expenditure of taxpayer money for acquisition of supplies, services, and construction is a critical matter for good governance. As such, there needs to be appropriate safeguards and demand accountability and maximize the value of the public good. It should be noted that the mechanism in our procurement system that provides safeguards for the maintenance of a procurement system of quality and integrity is the protest mechanism that has been built into the procurement law. Without deputizing the bidders themselves to keep a check on competitive contracting processes, who would know and how much money was being spent on what and for whom? Would audits conducted years after the money has been spent effective? Are those audits effective in policing the procurement system? In contrast, protests are in real time. With that in mind, Bill 28-34 accepts that protest disputes must be facilitated, but expeditiously decided. To that end, Bill 28-34 encourages the informal resolution of procurement disputes at the earliest stage to avoid the difficult and time-consuming dispute review mechanisms, both administrative and judicial. Such informal dispute resolutions, including mechanisms such as mediation and debriefings, is encouraged formally and informally in the federal government, and more importantly, they are found to be effective. Ironically, the government of Guam takes a different approach. It prefers to penalize protests and make it more difficult to bring a protest in the first place. The governor wrote in his veto message of Bill 224-32, I agree that the biggest challenge currently facing Guam's procurement system is the mechanism for dealing with protests. I respectfully submit to the legislature that it should consider requiring a nominal bond of 5% to 10% when protesting solicitations involving a certain amount, for example, $250,000 or above. Rather than having a chilling effect on competition, a protest bond will have a chilling effect on frivolous protests without discouraging legitimate protests. The idea would require every protester to pay a bond on the presumption that its protest is frivolous, but there are no statistics to substantiate the claim. The public auditor has noted that there are no issues with frivolous protests. That claim is an urban legend. When Bill 20-33 was vetoed, the governor again emphasized his demand for a protest bond, believing that a protest bond will put a chilling effect on frivolous protests without discouraging legitimate protests. In an attempt to meet the governor partway, yet try to separate legitimate protests from frivolous ones, Bill 28-34 took the example of an appeal bond which the governor analogized to and does provide that a protest bond may be imposed if a protest is appealed to the Superior Court. In this bill, a judge in its discretion may impose a bond on the protest appeal if it is likely in the judge's assessment that the appeal is frivolous. Thus, the penalty and the cost of filing a frivolous protest and appealing it to the court should not fall on a legitimate protester. Bill 28 has other provisions encouraging an expeditious resolution of the protest before it gets appealed. It sets a time limit on the time in which an agency can take to make a decision on the protest. Historically, the agency could wait out the protest as long as it liked, and there was no right to appeal to the OPA without any agency decision. The bill adopts the model set out in the procurement law dealing with contract disputes. There, after a stated period of time, if no decision is rendered, the protester can then appeal to the OPA. Here, that right is also given by Bill 28, and the time period is 45 days. The major impediment to expeditious resolution of procurement disputes, however, has proven to be the processes and procedures of the court system. The bill provides language that an appeal to the Superior Court be treated as a petition for judicial review. The bill specifically states, all appeals permitted shall be treated as special proceedings for expeditious review of the administrative decision below, unless good cause is shown that it should proceed as a civil action. The goal of my remarks is to emphasize that the intent of the bill is to expedite protest dispute resolutions and avoid obstacles to bringing protests in the first place. We can and likely will forever fiddle with the bits and pieces, but we must be more concerned with the whole. Our procurement code must provide a system that increases public confidence, is fair, maximizes the purchasing value of taxpayer funds, encourages competition, and enhances public confidence, accountability, transparency, and the integrity of the procurement process. As stated in the commentary on the procurement process in the American Bar Association's Model Procurement Code, from which the Guam procurement law was drawn from, it states, it is essential that bidders, offerers, and contractors have confidence in the procedures for soliciting and awarding contract. This can best be assured by allowing an aggrieved person to protest the solicitation, award, or related decision. Madam Speaker, I want to acknowledge the contributions of the legal advice that was provided from numerous attorneys, from the Attorney General's office, the Governor's office, the GSA, and most especially Attorney John Thomas Brown, who has dedicated over 3 decades of his professional career on procurement law. In fact, Attorney Brown is the one that's currently teaching the procurement course up at GCC, which is mandated by Guam law. And so I ask my colleagues to support the passage of Bill 28-34. The amendments made to Articles 9 and 12 have been duly vetted in the numerous public hearings and roundtable discussions that have been held over the past 5 years via Bills 224-32, 20-33, 162-33, and now Bill 28-34, and the 2 veto messages. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ada. On the bill, is there any member who'd like to be recognized? On Bill 28? All right, I'm not seeing any hands, so Senator Ada, you may close.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I think I've said enough already, but I certainly would be open to any questions. I would like to go ahead and send Bill 28-34 down to the reading file. And if any of the members have later during this session have any questions or clarifications that they would like for me to make, I certainly would be more than willing to get with them offline to clarify their questions so that they can in fact make an informed decision. Thank you.
Thank you. On the motion to place Bill number 28-34 on third reading, is there any objection? Hearing no objection, motion carries. Senator Rodriguez, you're recognized.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Speaker.
Good morning.
Madam Speaker, I move to place Bill 127-34 on the third reading, be able to briefly speak about the measure.
Please proceed.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this bill, Bill 127, and the three other bills after this, Bill 128, 29, and 130, what these bills do, Madam Speaker, is establish a statutory framework that would allow us to be able to use physicians, healthcare professionals that are credentialed and licensed under the U.S. military, whether there be a naval hospital, whether there be healthcare professionals at Anderson or Navy, to be able to allow them statutorily to participate in medical outreaches in the community, whether it be at public health, the community health centers, whether it be outreaches in the community at Swamp Road or anywhere really, you know, if it be done by a nonprofit organization or even by the government or even with the Guam Memorial Hospital Authority. As a personal experience, Madam Speaker, you know, we've been involved with a nonprofit that goes out to the community and provides free immunizations and free medical executive exams to those in the community who are indigent, those who don't have health insurance or don't have access to any health care services. And these are done through volunteer work, through physicians in our community. And a lot of times we've experienced where military physicians, those that are working at Naval Hospital, those that are here temporarily stationed on Guam, want to provide their services, whether they be doctors, whether they be nurses, allied health professionals, and there's really no statutory authority to allow them to do that. And so, you know, learning of that predicament, we've come together with some in the community and my colleagues here, 7 other colleagues here in the legislature that have come up with these bills to allow this framework to ensure that these military healthcare professionals who may want to provide services to our community free of charge, without any compensation, are legally allowed to do so. And so what this bill does, Madam Speaker, it, of course, number one, it answers a question of, is there a need for this legislation? And I say yes, Madam Speaker. Not only I know this through personal experience in assisting in these medical outreaches in our community, but Guam is designated as a health professional shortage area by HRSA, the Health Resources and Services Administration. And this is well documented in a letter that was issued back in 2017 by the Department of Public Health and Social Services that affirms that there is a physician shortage on Guam. And so this bill answers that question. Number two, as I said, as I mentioned, it establishes a statutory framework to allow for this to happen. And number three, Madam Speaker, it sets in place safeguards to ensure that those who the Guam Board of Medical Examiners may issue these special military volunteer licenses are indeed licensed physicians in another state. They are within the credentialing office of the military here on Guam. And thirdly, Madam Speaker, which I think is very important and this bill states, is that it requires the permission of the military commander to ensure that physician A or physician B is being allowed to do these services free of charge without compensation in the community. And so it's this legislation, Madam Speaker, and the other three after these are important legislations that are needed and will help our community in addressing a lot of the healthcare challenges we have, which is a lot of our people, indigent people, who don't have access to basic services, whether it be immunization, whether it be through consultations or through medical exams. This piece of legislation is indeed going to be helpful in moving that forward. So I ask our colleagues for their support. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. Senator, could you please just confirm that we're talking about the bill as introduced?
Yes, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Is there anyone who would like to speak on bill number 127-34? Could we take a 1-minute recess, please? All right. Session we're back in session. Senator, is there anyone else who would like to speak on the bill? Senator Rodriguez, you're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Before I close, I'd like to make one amendment in consultation with you, and I think it would really work. It'll make it crystal clear that those who may be provided this special licensure do it without compensation. The bill already states it, that it's without any compensation. It's on a voluntary basis. But to make it crystal clear, I'd like to make an amendment on page 6. And the sentence starts on page 5 on line 26. A physician who practices medicine on Guam under a license issued under this section may only practice, and this is where we're going to add, at Department of Public Health and Social Services, comma, the Guam Memorial Hospital Authority, comma, the Community Health Center, comma, and to strike a clinic, and to continue the sentence or outreach event that primarily treats indigent populations, and so on and so forth.
On the amendment, is there any objection? Senator Nicholas, would you like to speak? You're recognized.
Just a point of inquiry on the mover of the amendment as to why we're going to strike including a clinic in the ability for these practitioners to serve the community.
Senator Nicholas, could you repeat that? It wasn't
A
clear.
point of inquiry as to why we're going to strike the word clinic as an option for these practitioners to serve in the community.
Would you yield, Senator Rodriguez?
I was trying to remember what your amendment had, Madam Speaker, but I'm fine to leave it there. I think it's right if we say a clinic and we're clear that it is to, that treats primarily indigent populations, and I'm fine with that. So we'll leave the clinic on that. Thank you.
On the amendment would be on line 1 on page 6 to insert the words Department of Public Health and Social Services, Guam Memorial Hospital, the community health centers, comma, a clinic or outreach event. That. Any objection to the amendment? Hearing no objection, Senator Rodriguez, you may close on the bill. Oh, Senator
Madam Speaker.
Espadon, on the amendment or the bill?
On the bill, Madam
On the bill,
Speaker.
please proceed.
Thank you. On page 5, and this would probably be directed at the author, I guess that the whole section starts on page 3 under section 2 that's being added. And if we turn to page 5, which is a continuation of this section, it says, must be qualified to be licensed in Guam, period. Exceptions to the special purpose license to practice medicine across Guam lines include the following: the practice of medicine across state lines by a licensed physician on an irregular or infrequent basis, provided such practice occurs less than once a week or involves less than 1% of the physician's diagnostic and therapeutic practice. I guess the question is, if you have less than once a week, what are we talking about? You have nothing. And so I'm just wondering if perhaps the author has a rationale, because if you say less than once a week, that means you can't practice.
Senator Espadon, which page are you referring to?
We're on page 5, line number 10. I'm sorry, Madam Speaker. Starting on line number 8, but it involves such practice occurs less than once a week.
Okay, this part of the bill is not, this part of the law is not being amended. He's only adding a new subsection G.
Right, it's a new
that
subsection.
must be existing
oh, the new
statute.
subsection G,
Yeah.
excuse me. But again, I think maybe that needs to be revisited because of the fact that the language is not consistent with what I think is trying to be achieved here. Because in the end, right, if you read the law closely, even though this is not the part that's being amended within the law right now, if we're changing the whole scheme of how a military doctor who may want to volunteer would be able to help us with the indigent population, and we're not allowing him to do anything provided such a practice occurs less than once a week, then I guess I have some kind of a issue with the language, so that we might allow him. What if he wants to volunteer? If I may just take a minute just to discuss this with the author, and maybe we can resolve this offline.
Sure, we'll take a 1-minute recess. Thank you. We're back in session. Senator Espaldon, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it has been made apparent to me by the good author and several other our colleagues that really the part that's being added to existing law is the underlying portion. And what I'm addressing is something that is in existing law. So after, again, speaking with you and several of my colleagues, perhaps we need to address that situation that I brought up in a separate bill just to change it. But thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Espaldon. On the bill, is there anyone else who would like to speak? If not, Senator Rodriguez, you may close on the bill. All right, on the motion to place Bill 127-34 on third reading, is there any objection? Hearing no objection, motion carries. Senator Rodriguez, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move to place Bill 128-34 as introduced on the third reading.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, just like Bill 127, this again establishes the statutory framework to allow military physicians to be able to serve in our community on a non-compensatory basis. And what this bill does specifically is for dentists, for military licensed dentists. And so, as we all know, just like the physician shortage, there's also a need for our community, especially our young folks, to get basic dental services. I remember growing up, Madam Speaker, and always looking forward to that twice-a-year visit to public health to get our dental, our teeth clean and fluoride work done. That has since ceased. You look at the needs of public health, we're not able to provide them the resources to get that program going. And so if there's services in the community, whether through nonprofits, whether through public health can surely be able to take advantage of this measure if it becomes law, to be able to bring in those dentists who are military credentialed to be able to do some outreaches in their clinic. And so this bill does, again, similar to 127, is establishes the statutory framework.
On the bill, is there anyone else who would like to speak? On the bill, Senator Espaldon, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I probably should have said it in the first bill that the good senator has introduced concerning, but I support the previous bill and I support this bill and probably the succeeding bills along the same lines. As the good author explained, that there are often times when there is a real need for medical services that are not available, or because there are limitations on the number of qualified physicians and dentists and specialists and nurses and whatnot on our island. But more importantly, as we see the military realignment and the buildup continue, we will probably see some specialists and doctors and dentists who have certain specialties that could definitely help our people. And this would only really promote the goodwill that needs to happen between between the personnel of the Department of Defense and our local community. So I definitely am full support of this legislation and commend the good author for this work. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Espaldon. On the bill, seeing no other hands, Senator Rodriguez, you may close on Bill 128. On the motion to place Bill number 128-34 in the third reading, is there any objection? Hearing no objection, motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to place Bill 129-34 in the third reading.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, again, this is similar to the other two bills. This establishes a statutory framework to allow military limited volunteers to be able to provide services to the community without compensation on a voluntary basis. This specific bill establishes the requirements for allied health practitioners who are licensed with the Guam-based Military Credentialing Office. And so, again, just like the previous two bills, it sets up a requirement, strict requirements and safeguards in place to ensure that these professionals are credentialed by the military, are licensed, and have the permission of their military commander to be able to do these free services outside of the fence. And so I ask my colleagues for their support in this measure. And, you know, if I should have said it also earlier, but the good senator, the previous speaker, one of the important things I remember about his mom and dad, who are both physicians, is the type of volunteer work they've done here in our community and also off island. And so it really, what this does is it allows us to be able to harness that relationship we have with the military community. As I said earlier, I have personal experience where physicians and healthcare professionals want to provide these services, but can't do so because we don't have the statutory authority or the legal framework to allow them to do that. And so this is part of these set of bills that would finally allow that to happen and will ensure that we make an impact in our community. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
On the bill, Senator Atta, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. First of all, I want to commend the author of the bill for this bill and the two previous bills that were introduced to be able to provide the opportunity for the military professionals to be able to come out and assist the community with respect to dental needs, medical needs, and of course with this bill here with the nursing needs. I just have a question, if the author would yield though. What was the position of the, because I guess we have the medical board that kind of vets doctors who are wanting to come on island to practice, dentists, and even nurses. Because let's face it, you know, this is a business, right? And so if there's a limited supply of professionals, you can, of course, the old principle of supply and demand, which is, in this case, I think, unfortunate. But I'm just curious to know what was the position of these various boards with respect to then allowing these professionals to come in and practice their craft in the community.
Senator Rodriguez, would you yield to that question?
Yes, Madam Speaker.
Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, we don't have official testimony from the specific boards. However, there was discussions we've had with individual board members, with physicians in the community, and I really, you know, didn't want to go down this road, but you know, the previous speaker who has asked for the question has made me, you know, go down this, what I'm about to say, is that you have these physicians in the community, not all of them. You have some physicians that have built kingdoms, that have protected, you know, their domain, you know, and for them, for those individuals, those doctors in the community, they don't want these type of efforts to move forward, because they want to ensure that their domain is protected, and they want to ensure that only who they want, you know, credentialed and to come into this community are the ones who are moved forward. I mean, you know, we've heard stories of this throughout the years, and so you have that group, you have those people that would have those reservations and try to say things, try to make this appear that these voluntary physicians from the military are going to come out and take business away from them. I don't see how that can happen. We're saying that these people that come out and do these outreaches in the community would do it without being compensated, whether directly or indirectly. And this is for the real need of our people in the community, the indigent people in our community. And so for the most part, in discussions we've had in speaking to the professionals in our community, there is that support in doing this. You know, for military physicians to be able to come out and volunteer. And so that's the best I could do to answer his question. But for the most part, I can say that there is this support for these initiatives, especially from our people.
Senator Atta, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'm satisfied with the response of the author of the bill. I, for one, of course, you know, utilize the get my medical care from the military, and certainly the doctors and the nurses are professional. And I'm happy to see that we're making this sort of venue available by removing obstacles to allow these military professionals then to come in and provide assistance. So certainly I commend the author for the introduction of these bills, and I certainly am in full support of this bill and the two previous ones. Thank you.
On the bill, is there any other person who wishes to speak? Bill 129. If not, Senator Rodriguez, you may close on Bill 129. All right, so on the motion to place Bill number 129-34 on the third reading, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Senator Rodriguez?
Yes. On the next
What
bill?
bill is that?
130?
All right, Senator Rodriguez, please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move to place Bill 130-34 as introduced on the third reading.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, this is the final bill from the set of bills that establishes a statutory framework to allow volunteer physicians from the military who are credentialed in the military to be able to provide services in our community without compensation and on a voluntary basis. This specific bill authorizes military limited volunteer nursing licenses for nurses. These are for registered nurses, advanced practice nurses, and LPNs to be able to provide volunteer work in our community. And I'm going to share that this profession is actually what really moved me to be able to look at this effort and get these bills introduced and move forward. We were involved in a medical outreach that provides services to the community. And this several group of these nurses who are active duty in the military were coming out and providing services for about 2 or 3 different outreaches. It wasn't until after the third one that we were approached and said, hey, look, we were told that by our commander that there isn't any statutory authority locally to allow for this to happen, and so they don't want to jeopardize anything. And so when we sat down, took a look at this, and saw what was needed to allow them to be able to do these type of work in a community, because look, they're stationed out here, they want to be able to provide service and volunteer for our people, but if there's this roadblock, there's impediment, and so that's why we worked to ensure that we break down those roadblocks and impediments. And so just like the other pieces of legislation we just discussed, this sets up the requirements needed. It requires the base commander's approval for them to be able to come out in a community and be able to volunteer. And so I ask my colleagues for their support on this measure as well. Thank you.
On Bill 130, is there anyone who would like to speak? Senator, Senator Rodriguez, you may close. On Bill 130.
Madam Speaker, just like we've done in the first bill, I'd like to add the language. If you can guide me here, I know the first one was your amendment. What page do we add the GMH public health? Okay, line 16, page 4. Okay, so on line 16, page 4, I'd like to add nursing on Guam under a license issued under this section may only practice at Department of Public Health and Social Services, the Community Health Center, and the Guam Memorial Hospital, and at a clinic, and then the remaining stays on.
On the amendment, is there any objection? No objection, motion carries. Senator Rodriguez to close on the bill. All right, so on the motion to place bill number 130-34 on the third reading, is there any objection? As amended. Hearing no objection, motion carries. We're now on Bill 214. Senator Atta, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to place Bill number 214-34 LS as corrected by the prime sponsor, amended and further amended by the Committee on Environment, Land, Agriculture, and Procurement Reform into the third reading, and I would like to discuss it.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, Bill 214 pertains to the issue of creating subdivisions. Right now in our law, it allows for what is known as a parental subdivision, where a parent wants to distribute his land holdings to his children, and at that time they sit down with a territorial planner and they map out basically where the easements are and all that, and based on these plans and the agreement that in fact the necessary improvements will be put in a certain amount of time, it is then approved by the territorial planner, and the subdivision is created so that each of the descendants of that parent knows which piece of the land they're going to get. But what the bill does not do is it does not allow for a similar creation of a subdivision using the same parameters for what we would call a sibling subdivision. So let's say, for example, my father distributed his land and I got 100 acres, all right? Well, it turns out that I didn't get married, and I'm a single guy, but I have nephews and nieces that I would like to give my land to, or maybe to my brothers and sisters that I would like for them for me to give my share to them. So what Bill 214 does is it actually mirrors the provisions of the parental subdivision, and now allows me as a descendant to distribute my land in the same way as the parental subdivision to my brothers and sisters or to my nieces and nephews. And so the bill really does not change the subdivision requirements, with the exception of some amendments here, but simply mirrors what we have allowed for a parental subdivision. We are now going to make that same allowance for the sibling subdivision. The only changes that were made to the existing law is that right now the law requires that there be an alienation clause, so that then I guess when a parent bequeaths the property down to the children can't turn around the next day and sell the land. They basically have to hold on to it for 5 years. At the request of the Department of Land Management, they have asked that we extend that to 7 years. I'm not quite sure the magical number 5 and 7, but that's what has been requested. In addition to that, it has been asked that the time frame that is given to actually put in these improvements be made more definitive. And basically, you'll see there, like for example, on page 2, on line 15, it says that said improvements shall be accomplished within, the current law says, within a reasonable period. Well, what is that? So the bill proposes to be more definitive and requires that improvements, such as putting in the roads within the subdivision and whatnot, must be made within 3 years. So that really is the extent of what Bill 214 does. It mirrors the existing law regarding parental subdivisions. Now it allows it for a descendant to be able to bequeath that to their siblings under the same framework as a parental subdivision. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ada. On the bill, Acting Speaker, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I rise in support of the bill. I think the intent behind the original parental subdivision does extend nowadays to this sibling subdivision because of, the probates that we have had, and either property's been divided by this, pursuant to an estate to the siblings before it's had a chance, before the parents had a chance to fully divide it. And this creates an exemption from, having the regular, what we require of everyone else, and that would be the roads, the improvements in infrastructure. And I want to thank the author for including many of the recommendations of the Department of Land Management regarding improvements and extending the original bill with 5, and this now says 7 years, where the land would be tied up. They'd be prohibited from selling it. I guess the Department of Land Management has seen an exploitation, they call it, of the original parental subdivision law, wherein we granted these exemptions, and yet people really just sold it off after that without the developers being forced to put in the infrastructure. And so obviously that is not the original intent, and that creates a burden on all of the rest of us. I would ask that there's one provision, so this bill says now that they can't sell it for 7 years, and it says that they have to put in their improvements within 3 years. But I would ask that we also include language that's been recommended by Department of Land Management that gives them an enforcement tool. So I'm reading from their letter of July 12, 2018, page 2. They ask that we also include on page 2 of the bill, where it says on line 16, it says said improvements shall be accomplished within 3 years, that we add after that, wherein if said improvements have not been completed, the Director of Land Management, under advisement of the Guam Chief Planner and Guam Chief Surveyor, may exercise the option to null and void that previously approved parental or sibling subdivision survey map. I think giving him that kind of enforcement power would prevent that exploitation from, especially if developers subsequently take over this property. So I would ask that that language be added right there on line 16.
Thank you, Speaker. If
Pardon?
you, has this
I'm gonna-
language been circulated?
It has not. It's in the committee report. If I could read it again. After 3 years, add a comma, wherein, if said improvements have not been completed, comma, the Director of Land Management, under advisement of the Guam Chief Planner and Guam Chief Surveyor, may exercise the option to null and void that previously approved parental or sibling subdivision survey map. May exercise the option to null and void. May exercise the option.
On the Terlahi Amendment, any member wish to be heard? On the Terlahi Amendment. Any objection to the Terlahi Amendment? Senator Espaldano recognized.
At this point, because it's a recent addition, and I'm sorry, I did not read that specific part of the committee report. If either we can get that in writing, just to give us a little time to contemplate what the possible ramifications may be one way or the other, Madam Speaker.
We'll take a brief 1-minute recess. The legislature is back in session. The Terlahi Amendment has been distributed upon the advice of, or the request from Senator Espaldon, and Senator Atta, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So the Terlahi Amendment has been accepted, correct? Oh, it hasn't? Oh, so can we dispose of that? We'll dispose of that for now, and then I would like, so let's dispose of that, and then I have another motion.
Thank you. On the Terlahi Amendment, any member wish to be heard? And again, this is on line 16, page 2, after the words reasonable period or within 3 years, wherein if said improvements have not been completed, the Director of Land Management, under advisement of the Guam Chief Planner and Guam Chief Surveyor, may exercise the option to null and void that previously approved parental or sibling subdivision survey map, period.
And Madam Speaker, I think that same amendment needs to be made on page 3, line 13.
Thank you, Senator Atta. On the Terlahi Amendment, any member wish to be heard? If not, Speaker, you're welcome to close on the amendment. And did you not want it to be added also on page 3, line 13?
No, I have no objection to that, Madam Speaker. I would incorporate that into my amendment, that it be added to both sections of the bill, and I'll waive closing.
Thank you. Any objections to the Terlahi Amendment? Any objection? Hearing none, motion carries. Speaker Terlahi.
Nothing further, Madam Speaker. Stand in support of the bill.
Senator Atta, you're recognized.
Yeah, Madam Speaker, I'll ask that Bill 214-34 be set aside. We'll come back to it later. One of the members wants to further look into another issue on the bill. So we're going to set it aside. Thank you.
On the motion to set aside Bill 214, any objection? Hearing none, set aside. Vice Speaker Terlahi, you're recognized on Bill 219.
Madam Speaker, if I may, I'd like to make a motion for recess, perhaps come back by 1300.
On the motion to recess, any objection? Hearing none, we'll recess till 1 p.m.